Hey everyone. I wanted to take an opportunity to share with you one of my favorite processes with gardening and bioamendments is what we called throughout the composting primer. Here at Hollow Biont Hub, we called it MAFO, mess around and find out. And I am currently on that journey with something new, Johnson Sioux composting or JSC. And so I would like to share some of my current process with design and context, and of course, take any advice from those who have experience with Johnson Sioux composting. I would really like to bring more Johnson Sioux composting ideas into the primer, into a future version of the primer. So have at it. I do want to start with a bit of context here. I am composting in Ada County, Idaho, which Idaho is up in the northwestern part of the 48 lower United States. Um, it is a high desert system, so we have very dry and hot summers here, and we also have freezing cold, snowy winters. It's a very interesting situation. In fact, this photograph that I have here is where I've piled up all of the active compost that I made, or thermal compost that I made in the early spring this year. And I have to cover that with a lot of straw and even sometimes tarps to try to reduce moisture loss. And I've added a lot of worms to this, so they need quite a bit of moisture, actually. And then pay attention to this chain link fence that it's along. That's what I refer to as the dog kennel because I think it was originally intended for that by previous owners of this house. But it's a small rectangular area that I use for a lot of garden stuff. And in fact, this is a picture from the inside where I have about a 90 or even 100 centimeter thick sort of wall of wood chips, where the top I sometimes put clipped grass or fall leaves or other things. It's actually nicely broken down passively into some beautiful material full of worms. And then I have a drying rack here because with that hot, dry summers, it's a really nice way to preserve our kitchen scraps where they don't get smelly or anything. We just throw them out on this drying rack. Usually, after about 3 or 4 weeks, I have to take those to the next stage, which I'll explain. So, and then I have a picture of Riley here because I just wanted to say that while I use this dog kennel for all kinds of garden stuff, I would never keep this poor dog in there. She's a member of the family. She lives inside with us. She sleeps in my bed and gets lots of treats. So I think Riley would want me to share that disclaimer. Now, here's another couple of pieces of this. Again, inside that dog kennel with the chain link fence kind of perimeter there, I have a 200-liter barrel that's about 50 gallons. And I actually take that dry material from the drying rack every 3 or 4 weeks and put it in this barrel and sprinkle bokashi flakes on top. I'm working toward making my own bokashi or similar to bokashi inoculum for next year. But for now, I did find a local commercial source and did buy a packet of that, which I sprinkle in there. I keep the barrel fairly dry compared to what a lot of people do because I don't have a drainage port at the bottom of the barrel. And so I'm actually filling it up with, packed down, just moderately moist material and then pre-inoculated with bokashi to try this thing this fall when I want to use it, where I'll add some more moisture and give it a few weeks to finish out the process. By the way, it smells like kind of an earthy smell and kind of like a pickly sort of smell, which I think is pretty good, actually. I do have another area for composting that I started this year because I had a lot of sticks and twigs and old wood chips and extra leaves, and I just kind of made this passive mound. And then I decided, kind of at the last minute, to put squash plants in there, and they've done a great job of spreading and to kind of taking over the whole system. So, just so you're aware of of materials that I have available. I can use some fresh green materials from these squash plants. Maybe after about early to mid-October, we'll get a frost, and I'll want to harvest all that winter squash, and then the plants will at that point go into the composting system, right? Now, about me, some of you know that I've been part of this world for a while, and I mostly have focused on active composting. I worked with Elaine Ingham for almost 3 years, and so I didn't do everything exactly the Elaine Ingham way, but I in general, try to go through 3 or 4 heating cycles that last 3 or 4 days and turn the pile. It's quite active and build it with the right, mix of materials to get that like thermal phase done relatively rapidly. And then I'd let the pile cool down and put my composting worms, red wigglers, in there and let them help mature that compost for another 6 months or so before I would use it. Um, so this is just, I've already kind of blended aspects of Johnson Su system into this with the worms, but I really am interested in what about going full on Johnson Su and shifting my compost making from sort of early spring when I'm very busy in the garden to more in the late fall, right before it starts getting very cold at night, when I have a little more time maybe to build a system like this. So let's look at that dog kennel that I mentioned top down. And I've drawn this rectangle here with dashed lines to sort of represent the perimeter of that chain link fence. I would like to go into this corner and set up my Johnson Sioux pile. I'm actually going to use this old field fence that a friend gave me. They weren't using anymore. It was overgrown with weeds, actually. Pulled it out, and I will use that as sort of that chimney to make sure that there's enough airflow into the center of the pile. And I'm going with this sort of donut system, right? I've talked there's a number of different ways to do this, and this is the one I'm going to start with and see if it works. And this picture shows you when I was building an active pile, how that larger concentric circle of field fence kind of looks with the outer edge of that donut, right? So it will be very similar to that. And again, we're looking top down. The reason why I have these different colors here is to tell you that I'm actually thinking of targeting, the 40 to 1 to 51 to 1 C to N ratio I see recommended in a lot of Johnson Su kind of websites on the internet. Um, Quite woody, lots of leaves, broken down wood chips. Not, I will probably mix in that barrel of finished bokashi and some rock dust, but that'll be the main, like, kind of nitrogen source that's going on there. So I will have a fairly slow, um, highly carbon focused set of materials towards the center of this new setup. But then I wanted to also build in kind of this rind, just maybe 5 to 10 centimeters of material that would have a um, narrower C to N ratio. I will use a lot of dried grass and maybe even some of those green plants from the garden all chopped up to try to achieve this 25 to 1 or 30 to 1 ratio, because any air that's coming in from the outside in our winter months, October through March especially, is going to be pretty cold. And I actually don't mind to have a little bit more heat on those outer edges, um, so that it doesn't cool the pile too much, right? It's all an experiment. I'm going to get out my composting thermometer and check this often and try to make adjustments as far as layers removed or added, um, moisture management, all of those things. But this is kind of the theory that I'm practicing here, the what I'm messing around with, right? And I'm actually going to put in these wooden pallets as retaining walls. Oh, that picture of my garden just tells you I've got plenty of like nice fresh green material. And in early October, When the nights start getting colder, I will chop up a lot of these warm season plants and I'll have plenty of higher nitrogen material, right? But these wooden pallets I'm going to put into place as a sort of retaining wall in this section. And I'm actually going to take a lot of straw, maybe some partially broken down twigs. Um, I will have infinite leaves, basically, this fall. I even have friends and neighbors that give me their bagged leaves from their yard. So I'm going to put in a lot of insulating materials, loosely packed. But I want to make sure that the heat doesn't just bleed off of this pile too much, or else I'm afraid it will freeze solid when we get a bunch of snow on the ground. Um, I was able to do this before with an active pile into winter and just keep kind of adding some things to keep the heat up, insulate it, used tarps to wrap it, and it worked pretty well. So I'm hoping that with the Johnson Sioux pile, I'll get a similar outcome. Um, yeah, so let me put a few things together here, and then I do have a bonus slide about my indoor worm bin that I've just designed. But my perspective here is that making these biodiverse bioamendments is absolutely essential as a source of diversity to inoculate um, fungi, bacteria, protozoa, nematodes, tardigrades, all these things I've seen with my own eyes in a microscope that my worm bins can are just full of that kind of life, right? The diversity of life. And I don't even think that when worms have had 6 months with some compost that we should call it compost anymore. I think we should start calling it worm gold at that point. And I will use it everywhere in my landscape and garden. I pitch handfuls of mature worm compost into every hole I dig, across every seed that I sow, even on the surface of the soil. I make slurry with it by mixing it with water and then dump it over even established perennial plants and just treat the whole area like it needs this constant infusion or its benefits from this constant infusion of soil food web organisms, right? So when we put it all together, I see a lot of people making the systems out there overcomplicated. Whether you're doing aerobic or anaerobic processes, active compost, Johnson Sioux, Jadame, other kinds of production of biofertilizers, there are details to get right. There is a system to learn with everything. And a lot of the ideas don't transfer between systems, and people argue about um, what's correct and not correct and all. I think everything has its place. I'm very pluralistic in this way with garden inputs. I do think that we have to get our organism diversity up. A lot of us, I mean, are starting off with just a few little not very beneficial to plants bacteria, maybe. And I have seen what happens when um, the life returns to dirt, right? And helps it become soil again. There's very few places in my garden that you could dig and not find lots of worms happily munching away at the organic matter. And I don't use a microscope all the time, but on the occasion that I do, I see lots of diverse life in there. It tells me I've been going in the right direction. So if you have those bioamendments, right, and you incorporate them into your system often, and then you apply principles of regeneration. You reduce tillage or other forms of disturbance. You try to increase diversity. You keep the soil covered. There's six typically principles of regenerative agriculture or soil regeneration. It's worth thinking through contextually how can you do that in your system. It's not rocket science. It's a series of land management discoveries that you need to make. And then The last thing I'll rep out for here is you make continuous improvements in your garden, your backyard landscape, by having relationships with the organisms that are there and watching when the plants start to turn yellow, for example, and responding to that, hunting down and discovering what could be missing, what could be what nutrient cycling could be disturbed right now. How do I help that system reassemble a healthy, thriving ecology, right? So that's where I wanted to say, this is going to be on the Holobiont Hub YouTube, and it's still all about holobionts to me. If we are just managing plants and throwing some compost at them and not really changing our holistic approach to the holobiont, the host organism, and its extensive microbiome, we have missed some key pieces there. And we will make different decisions and have different results, much, much better, in my experience, results if we manage holistically whole communities of organisms that live on the leaves and inside the tissues and down in the roots, and even the organisms that interact with the pollinators that come to visit our tomatoes, right? It is um, amazing what can happen when you actually have all the pieces there of a holistic community. Okay, I mentioned I would have a little bonus slide. I just have one. I wanted to show you where I've gone with my new indoor worm bin. The other day, I actually went out and got this shallow plastic pool. It's about 90 centimeters wide, which is about 3 feet. That's the diameter. It fits under a kind of table that I have here by my bed in my bedroom, and I'm gonna probably put some dry, sort of fresh but dry wood chips, maybe just a few centimeters at the bottom of this pool to collect any excess moisture. And then I have purchased, by the way, the materials involved in this come to about $50 total. I have purchased one of these fabric planters. I don't normally do a lot with like mentioning products, but a friend told me that this company is really good, and I did some checking, and I think that they would be. And so in a year or so, I can tell you what I really think because I'm messing around with some smart pots in my garden next year, and I'm going to try this smart pot as my main worm bin here over the winter. So I may get a 10 centimeter diameter, like perforated PVC pipe to again act as that kind of hole in the donut of this system. Make sure that we get some air diffusion towards the center materials. But in general, with this fabric, the way that it is, I expect a lot of oxygen and other gases to be able to diffuse through this system. I'm probably going to fill up the planter about halfway, about 20 to 25 centimeters, around a foot, a little bit less, of fresh materials, leaves and other things and then I'll move my worms. I collect them from my outdoor setting and then put them in here. And I get lots of other little organisms, mites and things too. I do try to keep the slugs and pill bugs to a minimum or excluded from this, but uh, I will, across the 6 or 7 months of cold months here that I need to keep the worms inside to keep them happy, I will feed them, keep the water in there, check often what's going on in this big bin. And I'll let you know because I'm always looking for the simplest way to grab a few products, put them together, and make a really nice setup. And this is the one I'm currently experimenting with. Um, yeah, I'll let you know how it goes in the future. So if you've made it to the end of this video through all of that, I just want to say cheers to you and would be happy to hear in any way, shape, or form through the website, through our Slack channel, through um, YouTube comments or Facebook comments, what you think about these ideas because I'm messing around to find out what works.